Keeping local seafood local is the mission of a new project called the Ocean Cluster Initiative. The Oregon Coast Visitors Association says small changes as to where Oregon landed seafood is sold could mean millions of dollars for the coastal economy. KVAL's Gold Meadows explains.
90% of seafood served on Oregon's coast didn't come from Oregon. That's according to a recent study commissioned by the Oregon Coast Visitors Association, which shows most of the state eats imported seafood.
Direct interview with seafood processors, but also data from the Oregon Department of Agriculture about imports and exports. And then food stores and restaurants were also surveyed to find where they were getting product from.
Results of the 2-year study led OCVA to launch the Ocean Cluster Initiative. Marcus Hines, executive director of OCVA, says Oregon's product is sold globally, but makes less money than it could if more of it stayed local. He says updates to the supply chain infrastructure would be needed.
Exports are necessary, but our goal is to really maximize the local and domestic market here in Oregon first. We need places to process the fish, package, portion the fish, inventory to store the fish, and then also distribution systems to get the fish from, say, a local storage place to the restaurants and food stores.
Local Ocean Seafood is a seafood restaurant and market in Newport. Founder Laura Anderson tells us their meal kit often ships to Oregonians and includes primarily local seafood.
It's just disheartening how hard it is to find and buy good local seafood, because I know from our customer base that there are thousands of customers that we serve that say we just can't find this where we live.
As part of the Ocean Cluster Initiative, Anderson developed a seafood hub for fishers and buyers.
We're trying to support small and mid-sized seafood businesses in the supply chain because they're more likely to have that direct connection with a consumer or with a chef or with a retailer.
In 2021, Oregon imported $105 million worth of seafood. OCVA says increasing local consumption by 10% could add $90 million to the local economy. In Coos County, I'm Gold Meadows.
Anderson says for Oregonians who want to ensure they are consuming local seafood, their best bet is to ask the seller where the food originated.
Fish. It's supposed to be the healthy meat, high in protein and those good-for-you fatty acids. But America has ceded control of its seafood to foreign companies. And now our government must police 5.6 billion pounds in imported seafood to ensure we're not getting toxins along with our omega-3s.
My job is to go catch fish.
U.S. fishermen are almost extinct. Despite having some of the longest coastlines of any country in the world, America imports 90% of its seafood, about 15 million pounds a day, and it comes into operations like this huge storage freezer in Los Angeles. Each one of these pallets carries about 1,500 pounds of food on it, everything from seafood to produce. And this warehouse has 25,000 pallets. Some of this food could be in here for more than 6 months in -5 degrees Fahrenheit.
A large portion of it's going to be frozen shrimp or frozen fish fillets. Later goes to your shelf at your grocery store or on your plate at a restaurant.
And a lot of that fish comes from China. In October, the FDA warned companies that all shrimp and other seafood from the country should be examined for unapproved drugs. Dr. Mansoor Samadpour tests food for major producers and retailers that want to make doubly sure their food is safe.
Probably where I was really shocked was with imported seafood and the wide variety of pathogens that we found in the products.
Imported seafood?
Yes.
Now FDA inspectors take a closer look at those shipments. I'm with one of them at another cold storage facility.
I'm going to photograph it, okay, inside and outside to identify this particular product to make sure that we have everything that we need to properly follow through on the paperwork and where the sample goes.
They'll bring some of it to a lab to get tested, including a smell test. If the seafood doesn't pass inspection, it's sent back or destroyed.
Inherently, imported food manufactured overseas is probably riskier.
Dan Solis is the FDA import director in Los Angeles, one of the biggest ports in the country.
Here domestically, we have certain authorities, but overseas, they might not recognize those same authorities. So depending on that situation, we have to honor the country's rules and regulations as well.
That must make your job difficult.
Yeah.
The FDA says it uses a number of tools to target which imports it will sample. But consider this. Out of billions of pounds of foreign seafood, about 4% get sampled for lab testing, according to the FDA. But is that enough? In 2011, a government watchdog said the FDA needs to improve oversight of imported seafood. That's pretty clear language. The GAO came out with a report about 4 years ago making certain recommendations as it relates to seafood inspection and oversight.
Yes.
3 changes they recommended. None of those have been implemented. Why is that?
Feedback from
Lauren, okay.
We can't address them for you, and they're going to get upset if we do.
The FDA said that policy question was outside the scope of the LA import director's expertise. So we can't talk about the GAO report at all? Back at FDA headquarters, the agency said it stood by its original official response in 2011, saying the report may not result in a full understanding of its seafood safety program.
We're not holding imported product to the same standard as we hold our growers in the United States.
Carol Engel is on the board of an international aquaculture group that promotes fish farming.
The antibiotic use is indiscriminate. I had an opportunity to visit a pharmaceutical manufacturing company in China. I asked which were their best sellers, and they pulled out enrofloxacin.
That's an antibiotic that's approved for use in China, but highly restricted in the United States, banned in aquaculture and poultry farming altogether. We contacted Chinese regulators who said they perform random inspections weekly, but they wouldn't comment specifically on antibiotic use. Think you're immune from these issues because you only buy fish from the United States? Not exactly. In fact, much of the fish and seafood that we harvest in the US actually gets shipped to Asia for processing. Our largest single buyer of fish? China. In fact, China and other Asian countries are bringing in fish from all over the world. Whether it's salmon from Norway, sea bass from Chile, tuna cut off the coast of the US, or tilapia from inside China. Then they process the fish, fillet it, can it, you name it, and send it back around the world. While the country of origin is labeled on the seafood in the grocery store, there's usually no way for the consumer to know how many stops their fish has made before it ends up on their plate. So the fish you're buying or eating in a restaurant may have traveled thousands of miles, been frozen multiple times, even if it was caught right here in the States.
It doesn't make sense, and you're right, it is counterintuitive, but when you can take product produced in California and you can ship it around the globe and back, and it's cheaper to do it there, there's something inherently wrong with that. We're taking all these jobs and moving them offshore, but we don't have any choice. The labor rate overseas is so inexpensive. It's unfortunate.
This fish will go straight to a facility where it's frozen and shipped out to Spain. Then, destination unknown. But is there a solution? Maybe a way the United States could farm more fish?
The problem is the supply itself is coming from all over the world. We're selling tilapia that's grown in Nicaragua and Mexico and bringing that into the U.S. and putting it into our best restaurants. Not necessarily because it's the best product in the world, but because it's available. Half of the world's seafood is already being produced from farming, but it's being produced all over the world except here in the U.S.
Don Kent at the Hub SeaWorld Research Institute is trying to build a massive fish farm about 4 miles off the coast of San Diego.
As the Asian economy grows, they'll keep more of it there.
So fish farming is one way to deal with food security.
Very much so, yeah. We have a huge market in the immediate proximity to here. If you don't want to eat anything that's been developed more than 100 miles away, then you've got to learn how to grow it within 100 miles.
But this is just the research facility. They're still in the permitting phase and won't be producing for at least 4 to 5 years. Until then, if Americans want fish, there's a good chance they'll have to keep importing it from places where the U.S. can't fully enforce its own safety standards.
Well, let's jump right in. This is the side of capitalism that most conservatives, people in the preparedness community, they don't want to talk about. This is the dark side of industry. This is the dark side of free market system. Because when we look at this pragmatically, you can only come to one conclusion. And that ultimate conclusion is it's all about the money. It's all about the money. Money is the bottom line. Shareholders, the bottom line. As it should be, because that is capitalism. And unfortunately, people don't want to look at that. Everybody wants to make capitalism out to be something that it's not a lot of times. So no offense to the, to the Charlie Kirks of the world, the Ben Shapiro's of the world, the big conservative commentators. I'm not saying that I'm diametrically opposed to capitalism, but I understand it and I see it for what it is, right? The same arguments that are made about socialism, right? Socialists will say socialism just hasn't been tried correctly. We've never done it right. And then when you have any kind of, and then the conservatives, when you have any kind of criticism of capitalism, they say, well, this isn't real capitalism, this is a crony capitalism. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Socialism has been tried and it fails. Capitalism is tried and you always get crony capitalism. There's no way to not have this. There's no way for it not to be. So if I had to choose, right? And again, that's not what this video is about, but if I had to choose between two fucked systems, I'm going to choose the one that allows me to buy wood and create my own infrastructure to grow my own food, right? That's kind of where I'm at with it. But ultimately, what's important that we take from what's happening right now in the fish industry, in fish sector, seafood sector in general, is that you are seeing major corporate power plays in motion currently. When 90% of the food from Oregon, for example, Oregon is a great example. Big producer of seafood. 90% of it is exported out of the country. And 90% of the seafood consumed in this country is imported. And that's a lot of that has to do with the processing facilities. When big corporate entities own the processing facilities, they are the gatekeepers to where that food goes. And the reason why we don't have smaller local processing facilities is because the threshold is so high with the bureaucracy. So in order to run a processing facility effectively, it needs to be huge, right? And there's so many hoops they have to jump through. So you need a lot of product to make it worth your while, and you have to abide by a lot of red tape. The only industries that can do that are the big corporate entities. And they have purposely set up licensure to make that happen. So you could have a fisherman with the best of intents, but if you're expecting him to catch multiple felonies, to take that halibut that he caught from the ocean and sell it without a certificate, you can't blame these fishermen for not doing that. So what happens? The fishermen catch food, they take it to a processing facility or they take it to a processor that it's going to then take that food and they're going to process it and export it and send it out. That's just what it is. And a lot of times that food will go to a processor, and guess what? Americans want to buy fish too. So like was already said, that fish will come right back. That seafood will come right back. And unfortunately, again, this is going to play more as if you guys really get into this, you'll definitely see a lot of correlations, especially with China, and the Belt and Road initiatives that are currently happening right now. But ultimately, that's what happens. You have these big corporate entities that care about one thing, and that's the bottom line. And that's why food prices are extremely high. You see food fraud extremely high, which we've talked about on this channel. You see just all sorts of horrible practices, money laundering, artificially inflating prices, which is illegal. You see all these things happen because, again, when the worst that happens is you make these people pay tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars. It's nothing. Okay, you got me. Will you catch me the next time? And that's how this really plays out. So again, this is just the reality of the world we live in. So with that being said, are there solutions? There absolutely is solutions. And the solutions is kind of what we are starting to see in the rabbit market. We are seeing that, for example, the state of Oregon, coincidentally enough, has said, hey, we understand that food security is an issue. We understand that people want to process their own rabbits, and we understand that there's bureaucracy and red tape. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow farmers, and we're going to allow people that want to process rabbits to process up to 1,000 animals without any kind of certificate or licensure. That's huge. And poultry is already like that in the state of Oregon. So if we were to expand this to halibut, to salmon, to whatever, tilapia, that would really put a change in local growing, because now you can have a fisherman who can take 1,000 fish to a local processor, sell it local without having to worry about the repercussions of catching a felony for not abiding by the red tape. And I can tell you, big industry would shit a brick. They do not want that, because while 1,000 fish is nothing, if multiple people are willing to take on that locally, or willing to process fish, which again, this is not rocket science here. I mean, they're having migrants do it in a lot of these meatpacking facilities anyway. If you were to have that kind of initiative where people are starting to process and willing to take that on, and many people will, to make some extra money, no doubt, you could literally solve the local issue overnight. And as it becomes more and more popular, legislatively, you can increase it. 1,000 is just a fucking number, bro. It's just a number. If you want it to be 1,500 the next year, 2,000 then the next year, right? It's a number. It's arbitrary. So again, I think it's important that we look at this, because if you look at the raw data, if you look at the political moves and power plays that are happening, if you look at big agriculture for what it is, there are a lot of power plays that are happening. There are a lot of shifting commodities that are happening. There are a lot of things that are happening in that commodity market that should make all of us have a pause and be like, what is my posture? What is my preparedness posture? And how am I going to keep myself as efficient and sustainable as possible? And if that's not a conversation you're having with yourself, don't know what to tell you. You know, it is what it is. So for those of you that are out there that are awake, I highly consider you guys take a look at your options, take a look at what your options are, and go from there. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. If you have any suggestions for the community, let us know in the comment section below. I'm really curious, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on opening legislation to allow so many animals to be processed without a license? What do you think the implications of that are? I'm curious to see what you guys have in the comment section below. As always, all my sources are in the description box. And as always, guys, long live the Republic.